This is how to set up multiple pipelines for your sales process inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of our example Monday.com sales CRM system. And in today's video, I'm going to be walking you through how to set up multiple pipelines for different sales processes within Monday. So if you sell 2 different products, or your pipelines work in conjunction with one another, then this video is going to be for you. So first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and create our first board. Okay, so this is going to be our first process board. Now, in the example of this video today, what I'm going to be walking you through is investors and investments as 2 separate pipelines. So let me just explain that to you first. This can obviously be applied to various different things like HR process, so vacancies and applicants. They're 2 different pipelines, but they work in conjunction with one another in the same way that investors and investments would work the same way. So we need a pipeline to find investors who will agree to then invest in the investments that we find and make sure that the investments make sense. And then we need to match our investors with our investments. In the same way, and I know this isn't a sales process, but HR kind of is a sales process. Vacancies have their own process. So a vacancy needs to go from requested to in review to approved to then being live. And then you have applicants who go through the application and hiring process, but applicants and vacancies are associated with one another. So that is what we're going to be doing today, but we're going to be focusing on that investor and investment relationship. So I'm going to firstly call this our investors pipeline. There we go. Awesome. So then privacy options, obviously entirely up to you. Main, accessible to anyone. Private, only you and select individuals. And then we are managing investors on this board, or at least the investor process. So be careful with, and I need to be careful with terminology as well, because if this is not what you do, and I suspect it's probably not going to be, but I don't want to confuse you more. So we have our investors pipeline. This is the recruitment of, not necessarily even the recruitment of investors. This is where we are trying to find investors that are willing to make an investment. And then we need an investments pipeline that's then associated with the investor pipeline. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create another board and we'll call this investments pipeline. Okay. The purpose of this is obviously just to show you how they can work in conjunction with one another. And I hopefully haven't lost you, which I'm very worried. It's all got too confusing too quickly. So we've got investors and we've got investments. Okay. So now we would have obviously our 2 boards. These are our 2 entirely separate pipelines, and we can design these pipelines as we see fit. And then what we would also have is our standard accounts board. So we would have accounts associated with both investors and potentially even investments as well, because you're investing into something that might be an account. So we would have our accounts board. We would also have our contacts board as well. And those would remain the same, and we would have connections between both the accounts and the contacts to contacts to both the investors pipeline and the investments pipeline. So we'd also have contacts. I'm confusing myself talking you through this, but I'm hard about doing this video. There is no other way to clearly convey this message without getting nuanced and detailed about something. So hopefully you're still with me. Anyway, we've got our contacts board. So this would be, and let's just set this up, right? Keep it really simple. We'd have all contacts. There we go. And then it would be name, email, phone. So email, we'd have a phone. We can get rid of everything else because we're keeping this so remarkably simple. And then we get rid of the status, and then we can get rid of the person column, and we can get rid of the files column. So now we have Nick Boardman, nick@crmcrew.com, and then a phone number. There we go. So Nick Boardman, contact record, nick@crmcrew.com. Awesome. Phone 0777777. Awesome. Cool. So now we have a contact. Every contact is going to be associated with an account. So we're going to use a connect boards column, connect our contacts board to our accounts board via the connection column, select the account, always make sure we just press create a 2-way connection and then hit connect boards. So now we have the account associated with this particular contact. So in this instance, and you can see because we press create 2-way connection, the connection column is now visible here. So now we have all accounts as our group. Again, super basic. So we call this CRM Crew Limited. We might have, let's say, I don't know, a location column. We might have a company type. So this could be the status. And then I'll probably just get rid of everything else, to be honest with you. Again, just keeping this super simple. We might have, let's say, a domain, as that acts as a unique reference. So we might have a text column, and we'll call this the domain. And then if you're unsure why we do this, maybe check out some of my other videos for connecting stuff automatically. But then we've got company type. In all fairness, I'm just going to get rid of this as well, because this isn't the purpose of the video. So now we have our contacts and our accounts board. Okay, we can associate a contact, which in this case is, let's say, Nick Boardman, with CRM Crew Limited. So now we've got our two different pipelines. Now, I need our accounts to connect to both our investments pipeline and our investors pipeline. So what I would do here is I would go to my investments pipeline first, create a connect boards column, and then I'm going to connect my investments pipeline to my accounts, and then press create a two-way connection. Now you could arguably just connect it to your contacts and then mirror over the account if you wanted to. So again, it doesn't matter so much. There are some limitations with reporting, but let's just go for contacts for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and connect the contact associated with this particular investment, which is going to be Nick Boardman. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror over from the contacts board the account, because we've obviously got that there. So now I can see the account associated with this particular contact. Okay. Now this can cause issues if contacts, for example, leave and they go to a different company, but that company's still registered in your system and might be doing deals separately, because if I then change the contact or the contact account gets changed, then it's going to update all of the deals on both pipelines irrespective. So 9 times out of 10, I'll probably have it separate. In fact, just for clarity's sake, delete the mirror, okay? Delete the mirror. Contact record information, select boards, associate with the account as well, create a two-way connection. It's just best practice. So then we would go ahead and connect the account as well separately via a separate connection column. So now on here, we'll have an investments pipeline connection, and then the same on the contacts board as well. We'd have an investments pipeline connection. There we go. So now we can associate contacts and accounts with our investments pipeline. And then let's go to our investors pipeline, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. So connect boards column again, we're going to have a contact record associated with our investors. So it'd be contacts, create two-way connection. So this is the contact record associated. And this could be plural or singular. It's entirely up to you. And then we will do the same again. So connect boards, then we're going to connect our investors pipeline to our accounts, create a two-way connection. Cool. So now we have the account and contact associated with our investors pipeline and also our investments pipeline. So if we think about, and this is where it gets a bit niche, the standard process for finding good investments, you would be, I don't know, you could look at potential investments as stage 1 as an example, then actively reviewing investments, and then you could do, I don't know, financial, you could actively reviewing investments. So these are your different stages. Approved investments, and then you could have, let's say, I don't know, completed investments, and then you'd have, I'm literally making this up, and then you'd have cancelled investments or closed, cancelled or closed or lost investments, or let's go cancelled investments. So they didn't pass, let's say, a reviewing stage as an example. So we've got completed investments, we've got the different stages, right? We would then create that in the status column. I'm not going to worry about the actual detailed setup here. So we have our accounts and contacts all connected, the different stages of the process. So potential, let's just set this up. So potential to in review. Oh, Monday didn't like that. No. So go potential, in review, and then approved, completed. We go cancelled, and then we just want one more, which is approved. Awesome. So put that there. In review can be in the purple, approved can be in, let's go dark orange, I don't know. And then bring that down here. Cool. So now we've got the different stages of our investment process. Now, what we would probably look to do in this case is we would have a column to the right, and this would be a numbers column. So this is where we work in, this is where we're going to create the multi-process. So these are your multiple pipelines. Okay, so before I run ahead, you've got investor pipeline number 1 and you've got investments pipeline number 2. So 2 separate pipelines. Let's actually just set this up as well before I get too far ahead into this video. So potential investors. So you've found some potential investors. You've got maybe active working investors, I don't know, in negotiation investors, and then either won or lost investors. And then you'd have, let's say, won investors and or lost investors. Okay, so again, super simple, kind of made this entirely up, but you get the idea, right? So different stages of this process as well. So won, green, lost, potential in the gray, and then in negotiation, let's go with the orange, and then we'll just set up the different stages of the process here as well. So potential, we'd have them working, we'd have in negotiation, we'd make that one, there we go, and then we'd go lost, and then we go in negotiation as well. In negotiation, I think I spelled that wrong. In negotiations, just change that, and then reposition accordingly. So we put that there, bring this down here, nice and simple. So potential, working in the purple, in negotiation, let's change that to the orange, and then we got won or lost, right? So different stages of this process as well. So now we would have, and the point I was trying to make initially is you've got multiple different pipelines here. So these are 2 separate pipelines. They're both associated with the same account and the same contacts. Where I see people going wrong is they will create an entirely separate CRM system for one pipeline and an entirely separate CRM system for another. But that's not the way to do it. You have 2 different pipelines, and granted, these look similar, but the process is entirely different. And some pipelines can look vastly different to one another. And then you've obviously got your accounts and contacts, but your accounts and contacts, no matter how many pipelines, you'll only ever have one account and only ever have one contacts board. Okay, so then you've got here your investments pipeline and investors pipeline. Okay, so there we go. We've got 2 there, and then we go to contacts as well. And then we've got our investors pipeline. We'll get rid of that. So let's make this a bit bigger, and there we go. So we can see here now that this particular contact is associated with an investment, and we can see this contact in the associated account as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a new contact. This is going to be Tim Cook, and this contact is going to be associated with Apple. I didn't mean to open the sub items there. So then we'll connect Tim Cook with Apple, and then what we'll do is go to our investors pipeline, and we're going to associate Tim Cook and also Apple with this potential investment, or as as an investor. So they're a potential investor because they've obviously got loads of money, right? So they're a potential investor. We're speaking to them at the moment, and then we go to the working stage. So we've actually made contact with them. We're working with them, walking them through the potential investment. Okay, so this is where it gets quite critical, quite important, because we'll have a numbers column on the potential or the investor side. So this is going to be their investment amount. This is per investor, and this is again where it's going to get quite niche. Okay, so settings, customize, we go to the currency, the dollar as an example, and then we could hide the column summary. So let's say that we've spoken with Tim, and he said he's probably looking at investing about $5 million into whatever it might be. And then we go to our investments pipeline, and this is the investment value. Okay, so this could be the total value needed in order to complete this investment, or the proposed amount needed for this investment. And this could be 25 million as an example. And then we go customize, put this in the dollar, and then we could go ahead and we could hide the column summary. Okay, so now I've got 2 pipelines, one for investors. We're finding investors, but investors need to be mapped to investments. This is a really critical point for this entire process, is we need, and I'm just going to get rid of these data points to keep it simple. Sorry, I'm doing 2 things at once, but we need to match a series of investors to an investment. And then I want to see what the different pipeline stages are of investors for that in particular investment. But also it's quite critical to note here that An investment needs to go through its own process of, are we actually going to make this investment? And then if we are, we need to find investors to facilitate this investment. So 2 pipelines, both the sales process in of themselves are but they need to be connected with one another. So this is where we create the connection. So we're going to press a plus button on either board and press connect boards. Okay. And then we're going to connect our investments pipeline with our investors pipeline and just make sure you press create a 2-way connection. So now you have 2 pipelines within your CRM system that actually work in conjunction with one another. So the relationship in this particular instance is going to be multiple investors associated with a particular investment. Okay. So let's take Tim Cook here. We say Tim Cook dash Apple and then dash. And then in this case, we've got an investment and then we would associate them with an investment. And then let's call this investment CRM Crew. And then Series A. I mean, I hate all of that startup stuff, but you get the idea, right? Okay. So now we're looking at Tim Cook, Apple dash CRM Crew. Or we could go Apple dash CRM Crew dash Series A, or CRM Crew Series A. Okay. So now Tim Cook's the contact that we're working with as a potential investor. This is their account. This is their potential investment amount, and this is the investment that this is associated with. Okay. And now if we go to our investments pipeline, we can see the investors associated with this particular investment. Now, if I then add a mirror column, I can mirror over the total amount that people are suggesting that they might contribute towards this investment. So then I'm connecting my mirror column to my investors board, and then I'll mirror over the investment amount so far. Okay, so this is where it gets even more confusing. So now you've got the investment value. This is the amount of money we need to raise, hypothetically. And then this is the total amount of money in our investors pipeline where we've spoken to people and they've suggested that they'd probably contribute X amount of money. So we'll say here that Tim's in negotiation. Now we then have another contact that we've spun up. So let's say we got chatting to Bill Gates. Okay, again, Apple, this is going to be Microsoft. So we'll add him into, let's just go here and we'll change this to Microsoft. And then we'll connect Bill Gates to Microsoft. There we go, as we have done. And then we go to our investors pipeline again. And let's say I want to add Microsoft as another potential investor for CRM Crew Series A. Okay. So now I would associate Bill Gates and of course Microsoft with the investment CRM Crew Series A, and then this could be, let's say they were generous and they were offering 12.5 billion, or that's 1.25. Hate it when you forget a zero, right? So now, and we can say that they're working. So they're in the working stage. We've obviously got Apple, who's in negotiation. We'll get rid of these other dummy potential things here, so we can go ahead and delete these. So now we've got our investors pipeline, and we can see the different stages of the investors pipeline. But what's also quite important to note here is we might have Microsoft again, but this could be for an entirely different thing. So it could be, let's say, I don't know, they're investing in other investment. And this could be same contact, so Bill Gates, same account, obviously Microsoft here, but the investment amount is, let's say, I mean, it could be huge, 30 million or 3 million, again, forget my zeros. And then, but it could be associated with an entirely different investment. So it could be, let's say, Nvidia, is that Nvidia? And then AI investment. I'm just naming companies here, as I'm sure you can probably tell. But this is then associated with the contact and account from Nvidia, which is that Jensen fella. I can't remember his last name. I think it's Jensen with their service here. Hopefully you are beginning to get the idea now though. And then we connect Jensen with Nvidia, and then we go to our investments pipeline. So we just created the account and contact, and then we'll connect Jensen, I think it's Huang, isn't it? I'm not going to try and spell that, with Nvidia. And then we could go ahead and delete these other items just to keep this pipeline pretty clean. So now we've got 2 potential investments. Now let's say that this particular investment has been approved, okay? So this is good to go. And then what we can do is associate Bill Gates with both of the investments. So now we can see Bill Gates is associated with an investment into us. He's also associated with an investment into Nvidia. You can see now how they are working in conjunction with one another. Okay, so let's say the investment value, the total value is 100 million. There we go. Awesome. So now we can see the total investment amount by our different investors. What we can also do is we can add a formula column on our investor stage. Oh, that's a button. Didn't want that. Just quickly get rid of that. Let's add a formula column again. And then we could say, show me the investment amount only where, and we could say status equals 1. So now we're asking Monday to create a formula column to only show the value where the status is equal to 1. So we go 1 amount. So this is where the investors have agreed to make the investment into that particular investment. And then what I'll do is just set that as, so if we change the status of this to 1, it's going to show. I'll just set this into the dollar, and then I'll hide the column summary here. So now I can see on my investments pipeline, prospective investment amount, or let's call it potential. So this is everyone that's in the pipeline at the moment. I needed a space there. And then what I could also have, okay, and I'll just add another mirror column, is I could have 1 amount. So again, connect the mirror column to our investors board. Investors, where is it? Sorry, we have already done that. And then we just need to mirror over the 1 amount. So this is the 1 investment amount. 1 investment amount. And then what we could do is we could run a formula to show me the outstanding difference. So we could take formula and we say, give me difference. So it actually be investment value minus 1 investment amount. Okay, so now we're extracting some very specific data points from one pipeline to another formula, another pipeline via the formula column. So outstanding investment amount, and then we could change this to, let's say, in the dollar again, hide the column summary. So now I can see we've got a investment value, we've got 1 investment amount, and we can see the potential investment amount, and we can see which investors are associated with this particular investment. We've also got Nvidia here, investment value. We've got no 1 investment amount, and we've got an outstanding investment amount of 100 million. Now, if I then go to my investors pipeline, and I know Bill was pretty keen on this, and then he's gone ahead and changed this to 1, so he's happy to move forward with that investment, you can now see that this will update. So now we've got an investment value, a 1 investment amount, and then an outstanding investment amount. This is how 2 pipelines can work in conjunction with one another. Essentially, there needs to be a connection column, and then different stages can be managed by a formula. Whilst I appreciate this is remarkably complicated and also very nuanced to a particular business, I'm hoping the principle remains the same. Always 1 account, always 1 contact, and then they feed up to your investments pipeline and your investors pipeline. Now, if we go to our accounts here, you can see we have investments and we have investors. Now, if we wanted to, on the accounts board, we could add a status column and we could delineate between investors. So we would go investors. So this is an account type, and then is it investees? Investees, or I don't know. I think I'm about to make up a word, but let's go for it. No, I don't know. Let's make it up. Okay, my brain not fully engaged today. So we go investors and investees, or you get the idea, right? So we've now got 2 different types of accounts. Apple and Microsoft are both investors. Nvidia and CRM are investees. And then what we could do if we wanted to is we could then group by our account type. So we could group by the status, which is actually our account types. Okay, so now I can see who invests and who requires investment, or let's just change this. This is shocking. Requires investment. Okay, so now press apply. You can see we've got 2 different groups here. So hopefully that gives you an idea as to like how you'd manage this. So you could do exactly the same contacts. It doesn't necessarily apply in the same way to contacts, but you can do. So now I can see the investors pipeline. Now I could also then mirror over data from the pipeline onto my account, so I could see the total value of the investors made. So I would add a mirror column here, and on the investments pipeline, or the investors, let's take the investors pipeline, I could mirror over the one amount. So this is the total investment value across all of the investments that this particular investor has been presented with. So this would take into consideration all of them. So I can see here that Microsoft has spent, we've got 0 on this one, 30 million on this one. If I now go to my investor pipeline and change this to 1 as well, let's say they're happy to move ahead with Series A CRM crew funding, and that's 12.5 million. The total invested amount is 42.5 million. Okay, so we can still draw that information over. And then we have the investments pipeline here, and now you can see we've got 2 investments now. We've got Apple and Microsoft. The total one investment amount for this particular investment is 17.5. Our requirement on the amount we needed was 25, and our outstanding balance is 7.5. We can see the investors associated and the potential investment value. So if I then add another investor, and I'm not going to do this, we would then be able to see that here as well. Now, this can, of course, be expanded and is also remarkably nuanced to what you're doing. But needless to say, 2 pipelines can be managed in conjunction with one another whilst associated with the same accounts and the same contacts board inside of Monday.com. Now, there's a good chance that I completely lost you at the very beginning of this video. But if you have made it this far, first and foremost, congratulations. I'm amazed you followed along. I'm amazed I followed along. So you're doing really well. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch the video. If you do need any help setting up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Whilst I appreciate this is complex, it is still possible. And if your business needs this, we're more than happy to help. So check out the link in the description below. Book a call with me and we can have a chat. Needless to say, thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully it has been somewhat helpful, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.